The first thing I learned about owning an island is that everyone assumes you're a billionaire or an idiot. By noon on day one, 3 drones had buzzed my shoreline. A realtor happened to idle her boat by my dock with a smile like a sail's. Tag, and a man in a golf visor shouted from his pontoon that he'd gladly take the liability if I was in over my head. I was not in over my head. My name is Elias Finch. I'm 57, retired Coast Guard Chief Boatswain's mate, a man whose hands still remember the weight of wet line and the scream of the winch at 2 in the morning. For 3 decades, I dragged people out of bad weather and worse decisions. I am not easily rattled. I bought Gull's Lantern 2 rocky acres, 1 crooked boathouse, and a clapboard cottage that leaned into the wind like a stubborn old sailor, at a federal surplus auction for $1. It wasn't a trick. The island's lights had been decommissioned after a modern range marker replaced the old beacon. The Coast Guard filed it off the books into the General Services Administration, and then it sat. Moss on the shingles, salt whitening the steps, birds nesting in the lantern room, painting everything with guano and grace. What I didn't know, not until the 3rd envelope slid under my cottage door like a white snake, was that buying an island could start a war. The envelope was heavy, cream stock that tried too hard. On the flap was a logo done in elegant navy foil, Ashworth Isles Coastal Community Association. I frowned at the name. I hadn't heard of it. The mainland village across. The channel was called Dory Haven, a spit of cedar homes and a boardwalk that threw festivals whenever the sky remembered to be blue. The wealthy cluster south of us, new builds with glass walls and yacht garages, styled itself the Capes. Ashworth Isles? That was new. I went out to the porch, set the kettle on the propane ring, and slit the envelope with my thumbnail. The letter smelled faintly of perfume and power. Notice of compliance property, Gull's Lantern, parcel, owner Elias S. Finch. Outstanding violations, unapproved structure repairs, non-conforming dock, hazard lighting absent, heritage easement, non-compliance. Remit $4,180 in initial fines within 30 days to avoid lien and potential seizure. Signed, Veronica Ashworth, President. My kettle whistled before my temper did. I removed it, set it aside, and read the letter twice more to be sure the words were as stupid as they looked. Seizure of a federal disposal parcel I held by auction deed. The deed that sat in the fireproof box under my bed. The deed whose first page bore the embossed seal of the United States of America and the phrase Presidential Order 4773H. The administrative memorialization of a standing order signed in the 80s by an Oval Office hand authorizing final transfers like mine when the Coast Guard vacated property of no strategic use. I brewed tea. I did not throw the letter into the bay. I am not a man given to theatrics. Besides, paper burns, but paper also testifies. I slid the letter into a folder with the other 2 and labeled it with a pencil. HOA nonsense. By 3 p.m., a trim white launch traced a slow circle around my float. A woman stood in the bow, tall and composed, short blonde hair that probably cost more than my skiff. She wore a lemon linen blazer and white slacks, and because this is the coast and people pretend to be casual while counting zeros, she topped it with deck shoes that had never met a deck. "Mr. Finch?" she called, crisp as a page tier. "Depends. Who's asking?" I said, not unkindly. "I don't like to start fights on the water." She lifted a leather folio. Veronica Ashworth, President, Ashworth Isles Coastal Community Association. We sent you notices. "I noticed," I said. "You're very good at notices." Her smile didn't move her eyes. "Then we can keep this simple. Your island's structures fall under our protective covenants. The lantern is a designated heritage element. Repairs require board approval. So does overnight occupancy until safety certification. You've ignored both. Gull's Lantern isn't in your isles, Ms. Ashworth," I said. It's a federal surplus parcel conveyed by GSA per Coast Guard withdrawal and a presidential order. Your covenants can't reach across water and wish on a lighthouse. She tisked softly, like I'd spilled wine on her upholstery. You may not be familiar with the ways things are done here. I know enough, I said. To moor with 2 lines when a storm's coming, to read the tide, to ask for help before the mast snaps, and to smell a bluff from 3 cables out. Her boatman, a man in his 40s with forearms like pilings, tried not to grin. This isn't a bluff, she said, changing tacks. It's about standards. Your project. She glanced at the patched shingles and my spread of tools. Affects property values for a multi-million-dollar shoreline. Our residents expect views, safety, and harmony. Your dock looks like a hazard and your beacon is unlit. We have nightly complaints. I looked right through her, out to the channel, where the new pair of triangle dayboards glowed red and green on their stilts. The Coast Guard replaced the light, Miss Ashworth. They gave me the old one. It's a bird hotel now. That's precisely the problem, she said sweetly. We prefer our landmarks to be curated, permitted, photogenic. What you prefer, I said, stops at my mean high water line. Her boatman cleared his throat. Ma'am, tide's turning. She handed me a business card that wasn't a card so much as a challenge, soft white stock with a raised monogram. Bring your documentation to our office tomorrow at 10. We're at the Cape's Wharf. We'll get you on the right path. Her eyes flicked to the folder I'd left on the porch table, to the corner of a seal I let show by accident or fate. This will be fun, her eyes said. This will be work, mine replied. They eased off, the launch's wake hissing against my float. I watched her go with a feeling that was not fear, not yet, but the keen itch I get when a squall line fattens under sun. I set to work instead. The cottage's west eave had rot where a gull colony preferred to dine. I scraped, cut, and fitted. In new cedar, my hands remembering the rhythm of small fixes. Measure, mark, mind the grain, fit, don't force, fasten. The light changed from sky blue to pearl to the color of a fluke when a harbor seal surfaced near my ladder and regarded me with the pity seals reserved for clumsy terrestrial cousins. You and me both, friend, I said. The first drone came. At dusk, its high whine nettling the gulls into a whirling tantrum. It hung 30 feet off my porch, camera gimbaling, before I lifted a boat hook and gently nudged its universe. I didn't swat it. I just made the shot unsatisfying. It left, offended. If you want to understand how I came to buy an island for $1, you have to picture a government conference room that smelled like dry erase marker and surrender. I was 6 months out of retirement, living in a rented garage apartment with a window that looked directly into the blind confidence of my landlord's Labrador, a dog who believed with his whole soul that I was a tennis ball. My daughter, Maureen, Assistant U.S. Attorney, hair like a storm front when she works, texted me a link. GSA auction, Maritime Property Disposal, District 1. I clicked, expecting condos. Instead, a grainy PDF showed Facility 1B, Gull's Lantern Light and Keeper's Cottage, minimum bid $1 to facilitate closure of ledger for inactive asset. Some assets, I muttered, and clicked Place Bid, because curiosity beats fear most days. A week later, a bewildered clerk, Mr. Barlow, called me. Chief Finch, he said, discovering the old rank and clutching it like a life ring. We've, finalized the disposal. You're the highest and only bidder. Must be my dazzling offer, I said. There's just one thing, he added, and I braced for a punch that never came. The parcel includes a legacy deed rider and administrative order logged in, the American Register. It's one of those dusty executive directives that ensures navigational continuity during transfer. I'm sending it over with the package. It's quite something. It was. Presidential Order 4773H. In the 80s, during a housekeeping sweep of languishing maritime properties, the president at the time signed a blanket administrative order ensuring that final conveyances to civilians came with a tersely worded acknowledgement of original federal dominion, not power, not ownership, but a statement that the title was final and not subject to community restriction, encumbrance, or recall except by congressional act or Coast Guard necessity. It was legal language like corroded chain, ugly but unbreakable. The next morning, I ferried over in my skiff, the Lucinda, named for my late wife, a woman who could calm a squall with a laugh. I tied off, stomped up the steps, and found the cottage warm with early sun and spiders that considered me a novelty. I swept, I scraped, I drank coffee that tasted like hope set on boil. Neighbors in boats drifted by, the curious ones pretending to fish. A boy in a blue kayak asked if I was turning it into an Airbnb. I told him I was turning it into a home for a man who always meant to finish something. For 3 weeks, I worked. I replaced broken panes with storm glass, re-roofed the lantern with copper shingles I bartered from an old friend at the shipyard, and rebuilt the dock from the rock up, laying stringers like a rib cage. When my hands hurt, I soaked them in salt and listened to the radio, an old habit of men who spend too much time with the sea. That's when Ashworth arrived. 10 a.m. at the Cape's wharf looks like a catalog married a bank. Planters, polished cleats that never meet nylon. A tasting room whose blackboard menu said oyster flight with a straight face. I tied the Lucinda at the public float and climbed the stairs to a lobby of glass and white oak. A receptionist with a headset smiled without showing teeth. "Mr. Finch," she said. "Ms. Ashworth is expecting you." "Do I need a helmet?" I asked. Her smile thought that was funny, but had a policy against laughing. "Right this way." Veronica. Ashworth's office was not an office. It was a stage, sea-facing wall of windows, model ships in lucite cases. One framed photograph of a young Veronica in a regatta, hair a wild banner on a day that clearly favored the rich. She stood by a table where my 3 notices lay beside an open binder titled Covenants, Conditions, and Coastal Care. "Coffee?" she asked. "We do a Guatemalan that changed my life." "I prefer mine unlife-changing," I said, and declined. She gestured at the binder. "This is the book that keeps paradise from becoming a junkyard. You've violated 6 sections already: dock conformity, shore view maintenance, historic landmark lighting, and occupancy sequencing. You also must apply for a coastal heritage stewardship permit." "Coastal what now?" I said. "An internal instrument," she said breezily. "It acknowledges our oversight role." "You don't have an oversight role." She tilted her head. "You keep saying that, but courts say something else. Orderliness matters. Precedent matters. Community matters. And federal conveyance matters more," I said, laying a photocopy of Order 4773H on the table, like a card you don't play unless you mean to win the hand. Gull's lantern was transferred to private ownership by the United States through an executive instrument. It's not in your platted Ashworth Isles, by the way, which I can't find on a single county map. And even if it were, your covenants can't encumber a title like this. A pause. A micro blink. She'd seen a lot. She had not seen this. "That's adorable," she said finally, which is what people say when the truth refuses to kneel. She slid me a form with boxes like landmines. "Fill this out anyway. It will make your life easier." "What makes my life easier," I said, "is not participating in nonsense." She didn't smile. She polished the edges of one. "You're new here, Mr. Finch. We try very hard to maintain standards. My family has invested heavily in this coast. We dislike unregulated experiments visible from residents' breakfast tables." "Your family?" I asked, catching the scent under the perfume. "Ashworth Development," she said, as if that explained gravity. "We're building the Mariner's Crescent expansion. Luxury cottages, marina, event lawn. Your island sits in the middle of our view corridor, hence the need for coordination." Hence the need to bully, I said. The door opened before she could answer. A young man with a jaw trying to prove itself strolled in with a clipboard and a reflective vest he'd never needed. Aunt V, I put the stop-wake buoys in, but the county wants the permit number again. I looked at him. Aunt. Mr. Finch, this is Graham Ashworth, our compliance lead, Veronica said. Compliance with what? I asked. He looked at me like I'd asked him to do math at a party. When I left, the receptionist offered me a tote bag with the logo in navy foil. I didn't take it. I have no use for free sacks that make promises. On the dock, I dialed Marin. She picked up on the second ring, as she does for about 3 people. Dad? You okay? Define okay, I said, and told her everything. Letters, launch, the office. With ships in cages, the binder that wanted to swallow my island. Text me photos of the notices, she said, voice clicking into the part of her brain that hunts like a hawk. And the order. I'll route it through property and maritime. But this is important. Don't take their bait. Don't block them. Don't threaten. Document, document, document. I remember training officers saying that with less poetry, I said. Also, she added, buy a couple more cameras, concealed. Overlook the dock and the cottage door. If they are who they seem, they won't like losing. And losing people do stupid things. I hung up and looked out across the channel. A gray heron moved like a monk along the reeds. The Lucinda bobbed, patient. I have never liked waiting. I prefer rigging, but some fights require line, not fists. I stopped by Gibbs Chandlery on the boardwalk. Old wood, tar smell, a bell that remembers every bell before it, and bought 2 game cameras, 8 SD cards, and a coil of Takra 10 3-strand, because I can't not buy rope when I am near rope. Gib, who's been old since we were both young, squinted at my pile. You finally bought that rock, didn't you? He said. It's more wood than rock, I said. For now. You'll need thicker skin than that rope, he said. The Cape's got new royalty. They are very fond of rules the way cats are fond of bird song. I like cats, I said. I keep them out of the gull nest. He rang me up and slipped a whistle into the bag without charge. If you see something you don't like, make noise. The sea forgives. The land never does. The next day, the notices turned red. Same font, same perfume, but now the header said final action, and the number at the bottom had grown a 0. My dock, now lovingly rebuilt to withstand the tantrums of winter, did not conform, they wrote, to the community aesthetic of shoreline decking. My cottage's lantern window, a circle of glass where keepers once watched the weather like it, might confess, needed to be aperture shielded to prevent light trespass. My occupancy without safety certification endangered seasonal guests. Seasonal guests. They were already selling tickets to a view they didn't own. I photographed everything, every stamp, every threat disguised as a suggestion. I logged time, tide, the name of the gull on my chimney because he looked like a Bert. I mounted the cameras under the eaves with stainless brackets. I backed up the footage to a cloud account that Liam, my son, created and named Lantern Watch. Liam is a cybersecurity consultant. He once replaced a hotel chain's network with a hardened box the size of a toaster and smiled like a fox at the Canary Buffet. Dad, he said on video chat, face pixelating into my cottage. I set motion triggers. If someone approaches, your dock between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., your phone sings. What does it sing? I asked. Bad Moon Rising. I grinned in a way my face hadn't found in months. We did not have to wait long. At 2:13 a.m., my phone sang. The cameras caught the white launch gliding in with lights off, wake whispering against rock. 2 figures stepped onto my float like they belonged to the night. One carried a staple gun. The other had a roll of tape and a placard in a plastic sleeve. They posted it on my door crookedly, because bullies are never as precise as they think, and took a photo for their files like a child proving homework existed. In the morning, I read the placard with coffee in one hand and calm in the other. Condemned, unsafe for occupancy by order of Ashworth Isles Coastal Community Association contact, Compliance Lead G. Ashworth, I peeled it off carefully, slid it into the folder, and drove the Lucinda to Dory Haven. The sheriff there knows me, not because I've ever needed him, but because men wearing the C on their faces recognize each other. Eli, Sheriff Quinlan said, taking the placard between two fingers like it might bite. We don't honor HOA anything this side of the channel unless the HOA is a legal one. And this thing isn't signed by a county official. It's signed by a Graham. Graham, I said, compliance lead and nephew of Veronica. He's very proud of reflective vests. Quinlan pulled out his reading glasses, the moment in every cop's day where he admits the thing might be complicated. You want me to go knock on their office door and rattle a badge? Not yet, I said. I have something better. I set the order 4773H on his desk. He read like a man who can fish and think at the same time. Good Lord, he said finally. They picked a fight with a deed that outranks their birth certificates. Someone should tell them before they do something that wakes up the part of the federal government that doesn't nap, I said. He folded the placard, slid it into a bag, and labeled it with a case number. Consider it logged. You keep your cameras running. If they put so much as a toe on your float at night again, call me. And Elias? Yeah? Do not enjoy this too much. I won't, I said, lying kindly. At noon, my island filled with the small, ridiculous sounds of a life beginning. Kettle whistle, gull complaints, the scrape of a chair's leg, the thunk of a book on a table. I was not ready for the thud-thud of feet on my dock. I opened the door to Marin, wind-flushed, in slacks and sneakers, and that storm front hair pinned mercifully back. You brought the cavalry, I said, hugging her, surprised that my arms still knew how to hold something more fragile than rope. I brought the statute books, she said, tapping a messenger bag with a weight that promised good things. And lemon squares from Mrs. Gibb. She said you looked peaky last time. Mrs. Gibb could say that about a moose, I said, already unwrapping one. She spread documents across my table, county plats, state incorporation records, a printout of something called Ashworth Isles LLC. Here's the fun part, she said. Ashworth Isles Coastal Community Association is not a state-chartered nonprofit. It's an LLC with Veronica as manager. They filed no covenants with the county. Their heritage permit is a private promise ring, and their compliance notices are decorative. The only thing they're good at filing is press releases. Then why the show? I asked. Marin's mouth, so like her mother's when a patient required truth, tightened. Because power performs until someone turns on the lights. We sat on the porch with lemon squares and the smell of brine and new cedar. Boats moved through. The channel like patient commas in a sentence too long for its own good. Marin told me about her caseload. I told her about the heron-named priest that watched me from the reeds like a confessor. We did not speak about Lucinda, the woman, until the light went softer and the gulls quieted. When we did, it felt like untying a knot you both have circled for years. Over-under, pull-through, ease. By late afternoon, I had a plan outlined on paper that felt as sturdy as a good spar. Document, don't provoke. Confirm jurisdiction. Notify sheriff. Notify GSA. Notify Coast Guard legal. Men and women who understand the difference between a beacon and a brand. I wrote out the plan in AZ block letters and pinned it above my desk. Then I did something that felt like a prayer disguised as practice. I lit a hurricane lantern and set it in the kitchen window. Not to signal, not to taunt, but to remind myself that light is a choice. At 7, as the sun made the water look like coins spilled by a careless god, a text vibrated my pocket. It was Liam. Incoming packet, public dock scrape of Ashworth. You're gonna like this, Dad. A minute later, 3 PDFs bloomed on my phone. Mariners Crescent Development Prospectus, Investor Pitch, View Corridor Preservation, and an internal memo titled Lighthouse Sightline Mitigation. I scrolled. There. It was. Figure 4. A rendering of the Cape's expansion, complete with lawn events and champagne flutes lifted toward sunset, with my island airbrushed into a tasteful low-lying shrub. The memo explained how non-conforming features would be neutralized with community pressure, covenants, or acquisition. Neutralized, I said aloud, and felt something old and useful stand up inside me. The part of me that had cut a tow line in a gale to save the boat. The part that had once waded into a marina fire with a pike pole and a prayer. I forwarded everything to Marin, Quinlan, and a generic inbox the Coast Guard still keeps for legacy property inquiries. The subject line I wrote like a headline. Private. HOA seeks to neutralize federal disposal title. See attachments. Then I did the hardest thing a boatman does when the barometer falls. I slept. It didn't last. At 3:06 a.m., my phone played CCR again. I rolled, grabbed, tapped, and saw 2 silhouettes at my dock. One took photos of my windows. The other knelt and placed something under my door. Marin would tell me to stay inside, to call the sheriff, to not play hero. I did the first and the second. The third, I have never been good at. I opened the door fast enough to startle gulls into the air. The figures turned. One was Graham and the other a woman who hunched inside a hood like she was hiding from the moon. "This is trespass," I said, voice even. Graham lifted his clipboard like a shield. "We're posting an emergency notice per the coastal. You're posting litter per your aunt," I said. "Sheriff has your last masterpiece on file." "You can't," he began, then saw my phone pointed at his face. The footage glowed in the reflection of his nervous eyes. "We're within our rights." "Son," I said, "you are within your aunt's story." "That's different," the hooded woman murmured. "Graham, let's go." Her voice had that quaver you hear when someone isn't used to being the villain but has learned the moves. They left. The Lucinda rocked in their wake like a patient answer waiting for the right question. On the floor, the new notice lay like a threat that had lost its breath on the way to the punch. Immediate action required. You are hereby noticed that your occupancy endangers public safety. Failure to vacate within 72 hours will result in enforcement up to and including seizure and demolition of non-conforming structures. Seizure. Demolition. I slipped it into the folder. Then I added something else to my plan on the wall. Make this public, not with a tantrum, with evidence. At dawn, with the tide turning and the gulls forgiving me for the night's rude light, I set my phone on a rock, framed the cottage, and told the camera the truth. My voice sounded like a man who had hauled more than rope. I showed the deed, the order, the placards, the nighttime footage. I showed the memo that called my island a feature to be neutralized. I uploaded it to an account Marin had convinced me to create the last time she wanted me to modernize Lantern Chronicles. I did not expect noise. I expected a few fishermen and my wife's sister in Boise. By breakfast, 12,000 people had watched a retired Coast Guardsman drink, bad coffee, and explain how a private association with a nice letterhead was trying to swallow a slice of the coast. By lunch, a maritime lawyer in Boston had stitched my video to a thread about ultra-vires, acts beyond legal power. By sunset, a reporter from Channel 7 messaged to ask if the presidential deed line in my caption was just for drama or if it was real. "It's real," I said, and sent a photo of the emboss that the wax still remembered. The wind freshened after dark, salt sneaking into the cottage through the old joints as if to say, "You may hold the deed, but I hold the air." I closed the shutters on the north side and left the south open to the channel, to the place where boats come from and trouble sails. My phone buzzed one last time, an email from Coast Guard Legal. It was terse as they are, clipped like a good line. Chief Finch, received your materials. We are reviewing Order 4773H in context of your conveyance. For now, do not engage with private entities claiming enforcement authority. Advise local law enforcement of any trespass. Expect contact from a federal property officer. Semper Paratus. Always. Ready. I set the phone face down, blew out the hurricane lantern, and lay listening to the sea talk to the rocks below my bed. Somewhere, a bell buoy told a note the fog liked to hum. On the back of my eyelids, a woman in a lemon blazer was drawing a neat line with a ruler straight through my house, and a signature I'd never seen but had sworn to protect glowed like a brand in the corner of a deed. I didn't sleep, but I didn't need to. Men who have ridden out weather learn to rest between waves. By morning, the first TV van parked at the Dory Haven Marina, and somewhere in an office with windows that framed me like prey, Veronica Ashworth learned that the man she'd pegged as an idiot had a deed that could pull the teeth from her smile. She wouldn't blink. People like her don't. They calculate. They charm. And when that fails, they escalate. I poured coffee, set a second mug on the table out of habit that still surprised me, and looked at the plan pinned above my desk. When they escalate, don't. 9. When they lie, don't. 10. When they shove, anchor. Outside, the tide turned, and the gulls began their arguing day. On my dock, the sun warmed the new boards until they smelled like resin and promise. The war for a $1 island had started. I didn't raise a flag. I didn't need to. The wind already knew which way to blow. By the second week, Gull's Lantern wasn't just an island. It was a stage, and Veronica Ashworth knew how to play to an audience. I woke to the sound of engines, not the steady thrum of fishing skiffs, but the deeper, throaty purr of pleasure. Boats. I stepped onto my porch with a mug of coffee and counted 6 of them idling in a half circle around my dock. Banners fluttered from their rails, glossy vinyl with words printed so perfectly they couldn't have been handmade overnight. No. Unsafe structures. Preserve our coastline. Finch out. On one deck stood Graham, reflective vest glowing like a misplaced traffic cone, megaphone in hand. Residents of Ashworth Isles demand safe waters, he shouted, voice breaking like a teenager's. Your dock is a hazard. Your lantern is a blight. I sipped. Coffee, like discipline, works best unhurried. Your spelling's a blight, I called back. The megaphone squealed and Graham fumbled, nearly dropping it. One of the boat captains muttered something, and the flotilla slowly motored closer, making wakes that slapped against my pilings. My cameras clicked to life. Red recording lights winked in the morning sun. From the largest boat, a sleek yacht with more chrome than sense, Veronica herself appeared. Yellow blazer again, hair sharp, as cut glass, lips curved in a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She held up a document like Moses offering tablets. Mr. Finch, she said, her voice carrying effortlessly across water, you are hereby ordered to vacate Gull's Lantern within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in demolition. I raised my mug in a toast. Funny, I didn't realize demolition notices come printed at Kinko's. Her smile thinned. You underestimate us. I've done search and rescue in 30-foot seas, I said, loud enough for my cameras. If I underestimated anyone, I wouldn't be here. The flotilla lingered another half hour, neighbors from the Capes waving phones recording their HOA's crusade against the man who bought a $1 island. By lunchtime, clips of unsafe dock chants hit social media, spliced by Ashworth's PR team into slick videos with ominous music. But here's what Veronica didn't know. My kids were faster. Marin called first. Dad, your cameras caught their trespass last night and their blockade this morning. That's harassment, bordering on maritime interference. I'm already drafting. Liam messaged next, sending me a link. Check Lantern Watch. Their videos, Trending. So is yours. My upload of them stapling condemned signs at 3 a.m. hit 50,000 views in 2 hours. People love an underdog, Dad. By dusk, a local reporter rode over, notebook in hand, cheeks red from the effort. Sarah Pike, freelance, the kind of journalist who smells smoke before flames. She asked for an interview. I didn't give her fire. I gave her truth. I bought this island for $1 at a federal surplus auction, I told her camera, holding up the embossed deed. Signed under a presidential order. No HOA can override this, but they're trying, because they want to, erase what they can't own. This isn't about safety. It's about greed. Sarah's story aired that night on Channel 7. By morning, my quiet dock was swarmed not by HOA boats, but by news vans at Dory Haven, cameras pointed at the channel. Words like presidential deed and phantom HOA lit up anchors. Scripts. Veronica responded with escalation. She was too seasoned to blink. Blinking was for amateurs. Instead, she called in reinforcements. The following Monday, an official-looking skiff pulled alongside my dock, county seal painted on its bow. A man in khakis and a badge stepped out, clipboard in hand. Harold Fleming, county inspector. He introduced himself, though his eyes darted everywhere but mine. We've received complaints. Stop work order. He slapped a neon orange sticker on my cottage door. I peeled it off. On what authority? Building without permits. Filed. Them 3 weeks ago. Want to check your database again? His face tightened, as if I'd guessed the punchline before the joke. Until this is resolved, all work halts. $10,000 fine per day if you continue. Behind him, Veronica's yacht idled at a polite distance, binoculars raised. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. The message was clear. She had friends in county offices. But here's the thing about bullies. Paper only works until you put sunlight on it. That evening, Marin reviewed the notice. Conflict of interest, she said flatly. Fleming golfs with the Ashworths. His order's invalid if we can prove bias. Proof, I asked. Liam grinned on the video call. Already have it. Screenshot of Fleming's Facebook, him and Veronica at Pine Ridge Country Club, holding martinis, posted last Thursday. The orange sticker went into my folder. The footage went online. By the next morning, hashtags swarmed. Lantern Justice, Ho Fraud, Stand with Elias. And while Veronica Ashworth plotted her next move in her glass-walled office, I stood on my dock with a heron at my side, watching the tide rise. I had spent my life teaching young sailors one rule. Storms look unbeatable until you learn to ride their rhythm. The HOA thought they were the storm. They hadn't yet realized I was the tide. By the second week, Gull's Lantern wasn't just an island. It was a stage. And Veronica Ashworth knew how to play to an audience. I woke to the sound of engines, not the steady thrum of fishing skiffs, but the deeper, throaty purr of pleasure. Boats. I stepped onto my porch with a mug of coffee and counted 6 of them idling in a half-circle around my dock. Banners fluttered from their rails, glossy vinyl with words printed so perfectly they couldn't have been handmade overnight. No. Unsafe structures. Preserve our coastline. Finch out. On one deck stood Graham, reflective vest glowing like a misplaced traffic cone, megaphone in hand. Residents of Ashworth Isles demand safe waters, he shouted, voice breaking like a teenager's. Your dock is a hazard. Your lantern is a blight, I sipped. Coffee, like discipline, works best unhurried. Your spelling's a blight, I called back. The megaphone squealed, and Graham fumbled, nearly dropping it. One of the boat captains muttered something, and the flotilla slowly motored closer, making wakes that slapped against my pilings. My cameras clicked to life. Red recording lights winked in the morning sun. From the largest boat, a sleek yacht with more chrome than sense, Veronica herself appeared. Yellow blazer again, hair sharp, as cut glass. Lips curved in a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She held up a document like Moses offering tablets. Mr. Finch, she said, her voice carrying effortlessly across water. You are hereby ordered to vacate Gull's Lantern within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in demolition. I raised my mug in a toast. Funny, I didn't realize demolition notices come printed at Kinko's. Her smile thinned. You underestimate us. I've done search and rescue in 30-foot seas, I said, loud enough for my cameras. If I underestimated anyone, I wouldn't be here. The flotilla lingered another half hour. Neighbors from the Capes waving phones, recording their HOA's crusade against the man who bought a dollar island. By lunchtime, clips of unsafe dock chants hit social media, spliced by Ashworth's PR team into slick videos with ominous music. But here's what Veronica didn't know. My kids were faster. Marin called first. Dad, your cameras caught their trespass last night and their blockade this morning. That's harassment bordering on maritime interference. I'm already drafting. Liam messaged next, sending me a link. Check Lantern Watch. Their video's trending. So is yours. My upload of them stapling condemned signs at 3 a.m. hit 50,000 views in 2 hours. People love an underdog, Dad. By dusk, a local reporter rode over, notebook in hand, cheeks red from the effort. Sarah Pike, freelance, the kind of journalist who smells smoke before flames. She asked for an interview. I didn't give her fire. I gave her truth. I bought this island for $1 at a federal surplus auction, I told her camera, holding up the embossed deed. Signed under a presidential order. No HOA can override this. But they're trying, because they want to. Erase what they can't own. This isn't about safety, it's about greed. Sarah's story aired that night on Channel 7. By morning, my quiet dock was swarmed not by HOA boats, but by news vans at Dory Haven, cameras pointed at the channel. Words like presidential deed and phantom HOA lit up anchors. Scripts. Veronica responded with escalation. She was too seasoned to blink. Blinking was for amateurs. Instead, she called in reinforcements. The following Monday, an official-looking skiff pulled alongside my dock, county seal painted on its bow. A man in khakis and a badge stepped out, clipboard in hand. Harold Fleming, county inspector. He introduced himself, though his eyes darted everywhere but mine. We've received complaints. Stop work order. He slapped a neon orange sticker on my cottage door. I peeled it off. On what authority? Building without permits. Filed. Them 3 weeks ago. Want to check your database again? His face tightened as if I'd guessed the punchline before the joke. Until this is resolved, all work halts. $10,000 fine per day if you continue. Behind him, Veronica's yacht idled at a polite distance, binoculars raised. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. The message was clear. She had friends in county offices. But here's the thing about bullies. Paper only works until you put sunlight on it. That evening, Marin reviewed the notice. Conflict of interest, she said flatly. Fleming golfs with the Ashworths. His order's invalid if we can prove bias. Proof? I asked. Liam grinned on the video call. Already have it. Screenshot of Fleming's Facebook. Him and Veronica at Pine Ridge Country Club holding martinis. Posted last Thursday. The orange sticker went into my folder. The footage went online. By the next morning, hashtags swarmed. Lantern Justice, Ho Fraud, Stand with Elias. And while Veronica Ashworth plotted her next move in her glass-walled office, I stood on my dock with a heron at my side, watching the tide rise. I had spent my life teaching young sailors one rule. Storms look unbeatable until you learn to ride their rhythm. The HOA thought they were the storm. They hadn't yet realized I was the tide. By the third week, the fight for Gull's Lantern had shifted from paperwork to warfare, quiet, surgical, and dirty. HOA boardrooms can hide knives sharper than any Navy blade. It started small. On Monday morning, I found my fuel drums slashed. Gasoline soaking into the sandy soil like blood. The acrid smell hung heavy in the air, stronger than pine. My dock lines had been severed, too, leaving my skiff drifting 30 feet out, bumping lazily against the rocks. I knew better than to panic. The cameras had been rolling all night. When Liam downloaded the footage, there it was in perfect clarity. Two figures moving under moonlight, reflective tape glowing on their safety vests. One tripped over a piling, cursing loud enough to wake gulls. Even grainy infrared caught his face. It was Bryce Thornfield, Veronica's nephew, compliance officer turned midnight vandal. Sloppy, Liam muttered, rewinding. He might as well have signed his work. By afternoon, the footage was viral. 500,000 views in 6 hours, comments ranging from HOA Mafia vibes to "This is why I'll never live near an HOA." Veronica's camp responded instantly, releasing a glossy statement on Whispering Isle's letterhead. "We categorically deny involvement in vandalism. Mr. Finch's reckless accusations are designed to deflect from his unsafe structures and illegal occupation of HOA property." Illegal occupation. Those words burned hotter than gasoline. I sat on the dock that evening, lantern light flickering, when a neighbor rode over quietly. Pete Rodriguez, owner of the only hardware store within 20 miles, climbed up with a bag of nails and a grim face. "That woman's terrorized this community for years," he said, dropping the supplies at my feet. "People are scared to speak, but not everyone's blind. My dad fought HOA garbage back in the 70s. If you need lumber, nails, paint, I'll cut the price in half. About time someone stood up to her." For the first time, I realized this fight wasn't just mine. The next blow came sharper. 3 days later, a sheriff's deputy arrived by skiff. Rodriguez, young, decent, looked embarrassed as he handed me an envelope. "Formal complaint," he muttered. "Filed by the HOA against you for fraud. Says you misrepresented the sale at auction." I tore it open. Dense legalese spilled across. The page, alleging I'd concealed easements, failed to disclose community covenants, and defrauded the county. Penalty, forfeiture of Gull's lantern. I laughed, short, bitter, humorless. "I didn't conceal a damn thing. The deed's federal, signed under presidential order." The deputy shrugged, helpless. "Don't shoot the messenger, just get a lawyer." By dusk, Veronica's version of the story blanketed local news. Island sale under fraud investigation. Anchors read her lines like gospel. My social media feeds, once cheering, turned sour. Comments accused me of scamming taxpayers, stealing community land, even laundering money. They called me the Lantern Con Man. For 2 days, I felt the tide shift against me. Donations slowed. Some neighbors stopped returning my waves. Even Sarah Pike, the reporter who had interviewed me first, called cautiously. "Elias, this fraud story's getting traction. You'll need more than denials." That night, I sat alone on the porch, listening to waves slap against broken pilings. For a moment, I thought maybe Veronica had won. Then Marin called. "Dad, don't you dare give up. We've dug deeper." Her voice snapped like a whip. "County. Records show Veronica's HOA never even filed incorporation papers correctly. Legally, it doesn't exist. She sent the scans. Unsigned documents, missing seals, dates that didn't match. Phantom authority." Liam followed up with the kill shot. "Oh, and I traced their payment portal. All those HOA fines, they route straight into Jansen Contracting, Veronica's brother's LLC. That's wire fraud, Dad, with enough paper to hang them twice." The ash in my chest flared to flame. We weren't just surviving their attacks anymore. We were arming for counterstrike. The very next day, the smear campaign escalated again. Professional protesters showed up at my dock, bussed in from the mainland. Their signs looked fresh from a printer. "Save our shoreline. Stop the lantern menace." They chanted about environmental destruction while standing in front of gulls and driftwood. But Ray's cameras caught it all, half of them fumbling scripts, one checking his phone to confirm the chant, another still wearing a Denver Theater t-shirt under his borrowed vest. Hired actors, $200 a day, caught red-handed. Sarah Pike aired the footage side by side. Veronica's protest versus my hidden cams. The internet did the rest. By midnight, memes spread like wildfire. HOA Broadway show, Karen's Actors Guild, fraud by the hour. And while Veronica scrambled to repair her PR disaster, we filed something sharper, a federal injunction against the Whispering Isles HOA for harassment, vandalism, and fraudulent authority. For the first time, Veronica wasn't on offense. She was cornered. But cornered predators don't roll over. They strike. The next morning, I woke to the growl of diesel engines and the sting of betrayal. My dock was painted in bright, toxic orange industrial coating that stank of chemicals. The smell burned my eyes. Sarah's wind chimes clinked weakly. In the breeze, on the railing, taped in place, a note scrawled in block letters, "Accidents happen, quit now." The fight had crossed into something darker. The morning after the paint attack, my island looked less like a sanctuary and more like a crime scene. Hazmat crews had to be ferried in, masks on, scraping toxic orange sludge from my walls while gulls circled overhead. The air stank of chemicals and gasoline. I knew then this wasn't just intimidation. This was escalation. Veronica Ashworth wasn't trying to scare me off anymore. She was trying to ruin me piece by piece until Gull's lantern was uninhabitable. But desperation leaves. Fingerprints, and she'd just smeared hers all over my property. By noon, FBI agent Rebecca Foster stood on my porch, her badge catching the sun. Tall, composed, eyes sharp as a hawk's. She walked the perimeter like a detective in a procedural drama, snapping photos of footprints, fingerprints, and the taped note that promised accidents. "Pattern's clear," she said finally, voice clipped. "This isn't about community standards, it's a conspiracy. Harassment, fraud, intimidation, stacked high enough to call racketeering. Mr. Finch, you've got yourself a RICO case." I laughed bitterly. "Against an HOA?" She didn't smile. "Organized crime wears a lot of disguises. Sometimes it's suits, sometimes it's clipboards." That afternoon, county court buzzed like a disturbed beehive. A preliminary hearing had been scheduled, the HOA's fraud complaint against me. Veronica intended to put me in shackles before I could swing back. I walked in wearing my Coast Guard blues, not out of vanity, but memory. That uniform carried 30 years of storms, rescues, and folded flags. If they wanted to paint me as a fraud, they'd have to do it staring at the ribbons of a man who'd saved lives at sea. The gallery was packed. Neighbors from the Capes filled benches, some curious, some hostile. Local reporters jostled for angles, cameras blinking red. Sarah Pike scribbled notes, her pen dancing furiously, and at the defense table sat Veronica Ashworth, yellow blazer flawless, posture regal, her attorney whispering in her ear. She didn't look at me at first, only when I took my seat across. From her did she flick her eyes over, a smirk curving her lips as if she already won. "All rise," the bailiff barked. Judge Holloway entered, his silver hair gleaming under fluorescent lights, his gaze colder than a mountain stream. He'd seen decades of cases, land disputes, divorces, petty feuds, but even he paused a second longer when he scanned the room. HOA queen versus retired serviceman. The prosecution began. Veronica's lawyer, a pale man with slicked hair and a voice like curdled milk, launched into accusations. Mr. Finch knowingly concealed easements, misrepresented the auction, engaged in fraudulent acquisition of community property. He waved glossy charts and thick binders like Holy Scripture. The judge's eyebrow twitched, unimpressed. When it was my turn, I didn't rise alone. Marin stepped forward first, navy suit sharp, bureau badge tucked discreetly away, but her presence louder than thunder. "Your Honor, the so-called Whispering Isles HOA has no legal incorporation under state law. It cannot enforce fines, liens, or citations. In legal terms, it does not exist." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Even the judge leaned forward. Not incorporated? Not incorporated, Marin repeated, sliding documents across. Missing signatures, expired filings, a ghost board claiming flesh. Then Liam took the floor, laptop glowing. He projected footage onto the courtroom wall. Bryce Thornfield caught in infrared slashing my fuel lines, protesters reading scripts from their phones, Veronica herself waving a forged condemnation order at my dock. This isn't about safety, Liam said, voice clear. It's a pattern, organized fraud, extortion, vandalism, all routed through Janssen Contracting LLC, owned by the defendants. Brother, that's wire fraud. That's conspiracy. The judge's gavel cracked once. Enough. He turned to Veronica. Do you wish to respond? For the first time, her composure cracked. These are lies, she hissed, eyes darting. Fabricated videos, digital manipulation. This man is a con artist. Careful, Ms. Ashworth, the judge warned. Your nephew is on tape committing felonies, and your board's legal standing is in serious question. The gallery buzzed like a hornet's nest. Reporters scribbled, phones streamed. Neighbors who once avoided me now whispered, eyes wide with something that looked like realization. Veronica's lawyer tried to stammer back control, but the judge silenced him with a glare. This court orders an immediate injunction. All enforcement actions by the so-called Whispering Isles HOA are suspended pending investigation. Furthermore, I am referring evidence to federal authorities for review. The gavel fell again, sharp, final. The courtroom erupted, half in cheers, half in angry mutters. I caught Sarah Pike's grin as she mouthed, "Got it all." But as I stepped out onto the courthouse steps, cameras flashing, a chill swept through me. Veronica wasn't finished. Not yet. Her SUV idled at the curb, tinted windows rolling down just enough for me to see her smile. A predator's smile. "You may have won today, Mr. Finch," she called sweetly, her voice slicing through the chaos. But storms have more than one wave. Then the glass rolled up, and the Escalade melted into traffic. For a moment, applause from supporters drowned out everything. Reporters shouted questions, neighbors clapped my back, cameras swarmed, but Sarah's chimes echoed in my memory. And I knew the real storm hadn't broken yet. The HOA had been wounded, but cornered animals don't retreat. They bare their teeth, and Veronica Ashworth had plenty left to bear. For a few days after the courtroom injunction, Gull's lantern felt almost peaceful. The tide lapped gently. Hammers from my volunteers echoed like a heartbeat of progress, and neighbors stopped pretending not to see me. Some even rode over, with pies or offers to help rebuild. But I'd been in enough storms to know the silence wasn't safety. It was the pause before the next strike, and it came sooner than I expected. On a rainy Thursday evening, I was patching storm shutters when headlights cut across the channel. A modest Honda Civic pulled up at the dock. Wrong car for Veronica, wrong everything. But when she stepped out, umbrella poised, I recognized the same sharp eyes beneath a softer disguise. Gone was the yellow blazer. Tonight she wore khakis, cardigan, hair deliberately mussed like she was trying to pass for regular neighbor. Even her perfume was muted. "Mr. Finch," she called, voice pitched to something almost tender. "I think we've both made mistakes." I didn't answer. Just leaned against the post, watching her climb the planks with heels that still looked far too expensive. Inside, she set a briefcase on my table. The smell of leather and damp rain filled the room. With deliberate care, she snapped it open. Neat stacks of $100 bills filled the interior. The green glow caught the lantern light like temptation itself. $500,000, she said smoothly. Cash. You walk away. No lawyers, no trials, no unpleasantness. Take it. And this all ends. I stared at the money, then at her. You think you can bribe me? Her smile twitched. Call it a settlement, a neighborly agreement. We can put this ugliness behind us. Behind us, I echoed, keeping my voice flat. My phone sat on the table, camera rolling silently. When I didn't bite, her mask cracked, the sweetness drained, leaving steel. Fine, $1 million. Plus a written apology in the Gazette, signed by you. Say you exaggerated. Say you were mistaken. I'll even throw in another property, 2 acres by the marina. Just take the offer. Or what? I asked quietly. Her voice dropped to a hiss. Or I'll bury you in ways you can't imagine. I clicked my phone screen. A red light blinked. She saw it. Her face went pale. Get out, I said. She slammed the briefcase shut, storming into the rain. Tires screeched as her Civic vanished down the lane. By dawn, my video of her bribe attempt hit the internet. 2 million views in 12 hours. Comments poured in. She's done. That's federal. Lantern Man wins again. But Veronica wasn't done. Saturday morning, a convoy of protesters swarmed my dock. Hired agitators again, this time waving glossy signs about saving wildlife. They chained themselves to pilings with dollar store padlocks, shouting about conservation while standing in front of my eco-restoration project. Sheriff Rodriguez himself came by boat, shaking his head. You know these people? Never seen. Them, I said. Within an hour, half the protesters were unchained and in custody. 3 with outstanding warrants. Cameras caught everything. Another blow to Veronica's crumbling empire. Then came the frame-up. Tuesday morning, federal agents stormed my island. Rifles raised, tactical vests, DEA logos. We have a warrant, their leader barked. Anonymous. Tip says this site is being used for meth production. Meth. On my island. They searched for 3 hours, ripping apart cupboards, testing powders that turned out to be sawdust and plaster. At last, the lead agent approached, helmet under his arm. Nothing here, sir. Sorry for the disturbance. Liam called within the hour. Dad, that anonymous tip, burner phone, registered to Veronica's address. That night, Agent Foster herself returned, jaw tight with fury. She just crossed the line into federal felony, false reporting, SWAT, deployment. That carries weight. The trap was nearly sprung. Wednesday morning, the HOA held its monthly meeting. But this wasn't just any meeting. It was the storm's eye. 300 residents packed the community hall, reporters shoulder to shoulder, cameras blinking. Veronica sat at the head table, posture brittle, her smile stretched thin like glass about to shatter. She began with fire, her voice dripping venom. This man has destroyed our values, tarnished our reputation, endangered our families. The crowd muttered. Some nodded. Many didn't. I rose slowly, laptop under my arm. The metal chair scraped loud across the floor. Every camera turned. Before we vote on anything, I said, plugging into the projector, the community deserves the truth. Slide after slide flashed. Bryce slashing my dock lines, protesters fumbling scripts, Veronica offering a bribe. Wire transfers into her brother's LLC, county filings missing signatures. Each image was a hammer, each video a nail. By the time the final clip played, Veronica whispering, "I'll bury you," across my table. The hall was silent. Then came the sound of boots, heavy, deliberate. The doors burst open. Federal marshals strode in, badges gleaming. Agent Foster at the front, her voice cut through the hall like a blade. Veronica Ashworth, you are under arrest for fraud, extortion, bribery, false reporting, and racketeering. The crowd gasped. Phones shot skyward, recording history. Veronica froze, then erupted, shrieks, denials, blaming everyone but herself. Marshals clasped handcuffs around her wrists. Her nephew Bryce tried to slip out a side door, but met a deputy's badge instead. Neighbors cheered. Some cried. Others just stared, stunned, as the queen of the clipboard was led away in chains. For the first time in months, Gull's lantern felt still. No protest chants, no forged papers, no midnight vandals, just waves lapping the dock, and a truth too loud to silence. The tide had turned, and this time, it wasn't going back. The fall of Veronica Ashworth wasn't a single moment, but a cascade, like a rotten pier giving way plank by plank until the whole structure collapsed into the lake. Her arrest made headlines across Colorado. By dawn, every news station was running footage of her in handcuffs, designer hair plastered by courthouse rain, her smirk replaced with a stunned, hollow stare. But justice doesn't end with a gavel or a set of cuffs. It ripples. Within a week, the so-called Whispering Isles HOA dissolved under court order. Years of fines, liens, and citations were declared void. Families who had quietly paid out of fear were suddenly owed restitution. For the first time in a decade, neighbors gathered without clipboards looming, their voices shaky but free, and Gull's lantern, my Gull's lantern, took on a life beyond anything I'd imagined. Contractors came, not Veronica's thugs, but men and women with calloused hands and honest eyes. They laid new dock planks, patched roofs, strung lanterns along the shore. The air smelled of pine and sawdust, of sweat and hope. Marin worked her bureau contacts until we secured funding for a conservation program. Liam built the digital infrastructure, cameras, solar panels, a network to keep every step transparent. By spring, the island was no longer just mine. It was ours. We christened it the Lantern Trust. 90% of the land was preserved as a sanctuary. Trails wound through pines, boardwalks stretched across marsh reeds, and an education center took shape in my old cabin, rebuilt, but still carrying Sarah's wind chimes above the porch. On opening day, the shoreline was crowded. Veterans stood shoulder to shoulder with school children. Local businesses lined the dock with banners, and Agent Foster herself cut the ribbon. The breeze carried laughter, barbecue smoke, and something sweeter, relief. This isn't about one man's fight, I told the crowd, voice rough but steady. It's about proving that truth outlasts fear, that no bully, no board, no fraud can stand forever against people who refuse to bow. The cheer that followed shook the gulls from their perches, but the legacy stretched further. Sarah Pike's investigative series won awards, airing nationwide as Lantern Justice: How One Island Exposed HOA Corruption. Emails poured in from homeowners across the country, sharing horror stories of predatory boards, fake citations, and intimidation. Some even traveled to Gull's lantern just to touch the dock, like pilgrims at a shrine. One man from Texas gripped my hand so hard, my knuckles popped. "You showed us we're not alone," he said, tears shining. "If you can fight, so can we." And then there was Veronica's sentencing. 8 years federal prison. 15 million restitution to victims. Her nephew Bryce got probation and weekends picking trash along the same trails he once sabotaged. The irony was too rich for words. Months passed. Seasons turned. The Lantern Trust blossomed into more than a park. It became a gathering place. Potlucks under lantern light, veterans' retreats, children planting pines where once my shoreline was scarred. The sound of laughter replaced the echoes of backhoes. And me? I found something I hadn't expected. Sarah Pike, who had started as a reporter chasing a story, stayed on the island long after her articles went to print. She set her laptop on the porch railing, tapping out new investigations while sipping my terrible coffee. Somewhere between interviews and rebuilding, between courtrooms and dock sunsets, she became more than a journalist. She became home. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in purples and gold, I pulled a small box from my pocket. My hands, scarred and rough from years at sea, shook as I opened it. "Sarah," I said softly, "we built truth here. Maybe we can build the rest of life too." Her answer was a kiss that tasted of rain and pine. The lantern wedding the following spring was small but perfect. Neighbors, friends, even Agent Foster attended. Marin stood as my anchor, Liam rigged. The sound system and Sarah's chimes sang in the breeze as we exchanged vows. Justice had brought me peace. Love gave it meaning. Now every evening I sit on the dock as lanterns flicker across the shoreline. The water reflects stars like diamonds scattered across black silk. The chimes whisper, not of grief anymore, but of endurance. I whisper back, "We did it, Sarah. We won." Because Gull's lantern isn't just an island anymore. It's a promise. That truth endures. That family is stronger than fraud. That even against clipboards and courts, the human spirit can still rise. Board by board, beam by beam, chime by chime, still standing, still singing, and still ours.